Thank you so much. Right now, everyone, President Donald Trump is having a working luncheon with the Prime Minister of Japan, all happening right now as we speak. Just a short time ago, the two leaders held a joint news conference where President Trump promised to continue our allegiance to Japan. President Trump also doubling down on his executive order on immigration, saying the reason he won the election was because Americans, we all want to feel safe. I'm Trish Regan. Welcome, everyone, to the Intelligence Report. Here's the president just moments ago speaking about that now infamous Ninth Circuit Court decision.
We are going to do whatever is necessary to keep our country safe. Safety is a primary reason. One of the reasons I'm standing here today is the security of our country. The voters felt that I would give it the best security. So we'll be doing something very rapidly having to do with additional security for our country. You'll be seeing that sometime next week. In addition, we will continue to go through the court process, and ultimately, I have no doubt that we'll win that particular case.
All right, I want to go right now to our own Blake Berman, who got one of the first questions there. Blake, great to see you. It's great to get one of the first questions there to the president. I just want the viewers to see it, so let's take a pause here and watch Blake.
I've learned a lot in the last 2 weeks, and terrorism is a far greater threat than the people of our country understand, but we're going to take care of it based off of what you have learned and now knowing that your executive order is at least temporarily on hold. Do you still feel as confident now as you have been at any point that you and the administration will be able to protect the homeland?
All right, that was Blake Berman asking one of those first questions. What did he tell you, Blake?
Well, Trish, the comment there that I had read came from a speech that he had given earlier this week to law enforcement groups here in Washington, D.C. That comment had kind of caught my eye with the president basically saying, hey, look, I've learned a lot here, and terrorism is a big issue. So that was the reason for asking that question, wanting to know, especially with the extreme vetting order on hold, do you think that you can protect the homeland? And the president looked right at me, and this was the second question basically that he had been asked on this, and said yes, as one might expect. But this was him trying to get his message across that his administration is going to go forward, and they are going to do everything in their power, including moving forward rapidly, was the way he put it, to try to get his executive order, or at least some of what the administration might have coming down the pike, passed. Here was the president's answer to my response a little while ago. Listen.
I feel totally confident that we will have tremendous security for the people of the United States. We will be extreme vetting, which is a term that I developed early in my campaign. We will not allow people into our country who are looking to do harm to our people. We will allow lots of people into our country that will love our people and do good for our country. It's always going to be that way.
Separately, Trish, I asked the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe point blank whether he feels that the president withdrawing, or at least having the intention to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, is a mistake. Mr. Abe saying he kind of he didn't give really a yes or no on that, just to say, look, there's going to be negotiations going forward. He says his number two will be meeting with the vice president this weekend, and basically said that he is, quote, optimistic results will be seen from the dialogue. A little bit of a punt there, but him laying the ground that they're going to try to get something done as far as trade goes.
All right, Blake Berman, thank you so much. Joining me with more analysis, Fox News contributor, Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to have you here. Good to see you in person. You know, it seems to me that, you know, and look, I'm no lawyer, but I'll tell you, I've read this 1952 law. Yeah. And it says whenever the president finds that the entry of aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation and for such period as he deems necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. Yet we get the Ninth Circuit saying no way.
Well, I think the fact that you're not a lawyer is probably beneficial. I'm not a lawyer either. I've been accused of practicing law without a license, but here's the fact. Most of us are able to take complex things, make them simple. Lawyers take simple things and make them complex. But on this, there's nothing complex about it. The president has the sole authority, not the judicial branch, not even the legislative branch, but the third branch of government, equal to the judicial, not less than. And that's why this is so offensive to me, because the judicial branch is acting as if it can school the president on national security when that is solely the purview of the presidency. And the political decision that was made by the court, and that's what it was a political decision, has no place in the courtroom. They're not to judge policy or politics. The president was elected for two basic things: to put Americans in business by cutting taxes and cutting regulation and bringing jobs, and putting terrorism out of business. He's focused on those two things, and I guess some of the people on the other side can't stand it.
Governor, it seems to me that the one thing we need to be able to do is offer people in this country security, safety. That is the number one thing that government is supposed to do. And now you got the Ninth Circuit and a judge in Seattle trying to get in the way of that. Disturbing. Let me share with you. These are members of President Obama's own administration basically saying that these refugees that he wanted to bring here and that they are bringing here right now cannot be vetted. Watch.
We're not going to know a whole lot about the individual refugees that come forward from the UN High Commission on Refugees for resettlement and vetting.
My concern there is that there are certain gaps that I don't want to talk about publicly in that in the data available to us.
Yeah. So, you know, if I'm president, I'm going to walk in and say, okay, there are these gaps.
Right.
You all admitted it. Let's take a pause here and figure it out.
And all the president did, he didn't ban anybody. What he really did was he put a speed bump, not a stop sign. And he said, let's slow this thing down. If you want to come to America, you don't have a right to come to America if you're not an American citizen. So we're going to check you out. And if you don't check out, we don't check you in. What's wrong with that? I don't think Americans generally find anything wrong with that. What they find wrong is a judge sitting out in Washington State who seems to be more interested in protecting the right of a terrorist to get in America than the right of protecting an American to stay safe from a terrorist.
Let me share with you some of these numbers. Just in the last week, we have admitted 359 people from Syria. We have admitted 252 from Iraq, 109 from Iran, 130 from Somalia. I mean, we're basically at a level here. If we keep this kind of pace up, we're going to outdo Obama in terms of the refugees that are being brought into this country.
And the Washington Times reported today that 77% of the refugees or immigrants who are coming in over the past week are coming from these 7 nations, because it's kind of like, uh-oh, if we're going to go, we better go now while the door is open, thanks to this judge and thanks to the Ninth Circuit, or I'd call them the Ninth Short Circuit, because that's what they are. This is really disturbing. And so the president, I hope, will refile the executive order. He'll say, one judge got it wrong, we'll change the words, but we're going to do it again because we are supposed to do this to protect America.
I think you're right, though, when you say it's disturbing, because the idea that this judge is getting in the way of us being able to secure the nation is something that I think is fundamentally flawed. I know I'm going to see you in a little bit, so don't go anywhere.
Okay.
All right, a major blow to our safety, everyone. A major blow to our country after the Ninth Circuit Court rules against President Trump's temporary travel halt. President Trump quickly firing back, tweeting, "See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake." The very latest on what's next here for this executive order on immigration, I want to go to our own Peter Barnes, who is in Washington. Okay, Peter, where do we go from here?
Well, Trish, you just heard the president say in the press conference that he will continue the legal battle, continue to go through the legal process to try to get this executive order moving forward. And he does have several options. One of them is to appeal to the Supreme Court, requesting an emergency order to block the Ninth Circuit's decision so that his executive order could go forward. The administration could also appeal to the Ninth Circuit itself and ask for a larger group of judges to review the decision again. In that instance, a randomly chosen panel of 11 appeals court judges would do that. The administration could also just accept the ruling. It doesn't sound like the president wants to do that, and focus on the fight at the district court, where 2 states are seeking to permanently block the president's order. All this fight yesterday, and the decision yesterday was about a temporary order to block it. But the president, as Governor Huckabee and others have said, could issue a new executive order rewritten to address the appeals court's concerns. Listen.
the White House should immediately reissue the executive order, but include in there what the White House had already explained, that it didn't apply to people that already had their green cards. That addresses the issue that the Ninth Circuit raised, that ought to, even for people that don't care about the Constitution like the justices on the Ninth Circuit, that ought to take care of it.
Yeah, and for people with green cards, they're called permanent resident aliens who have a right to work here. And the Ninth Circuit said that the executive order did not give them proper due process. So the administration could easily rewrite the executive order to take care of those folks.
All right,
Trish?
Peter Barnes, thank you so much. You know, I keep saying this, it's rather alarming that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is ruling against the president's travel halt. I mean, an executive order that's meant to protect Americans. He has deemed it necessary. It's an order our president certainly has every right to enforce according to the Immigration and National Act of 1952. But we shouldn't be surprised, right? We shouldn't be surprised by any of this, because here you go. Famed economist Thomas Sowell once said, and I quote, "One of these days, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals may declare the Constitution unconstitutional," because that's just the kind of court they are. Joining me right now for more analysis on what's next for President Trump's immigration order, Jordan Sekulow from the American Center for Law and Justice. Good to have you here, Jordan. You know, Peter just laid it out. There's a few options there for the president. I don't think he's going to want to take it back to Seattle. But what about the Supreme Court?
You know, I think that here I'm starting to feel more and more as the day goes on that, and you see the comments coming from the president just in this press conference with the Japanese prime minister, that to expect something next week. What we are advocating for, Trish, at the ACLJ, and we filed a brief on behalf of the president, as you look at this opinion, which never even cites the legislation, you know, that gives the authority to President Trump to do this, the Immigration Nationality Act. It never cites that section 1182F. But we do believe that rewriting the executive order, it moots this case out, and it's you probably have a stronger executive order to take. You may still lose at the Ninth Circuit, honestly, but to take it to the Supreme Court, where you've got these only 8 justices, get it a little bit tighter, may be the best option. And I think that is. Do
you run the risk, though, at the Supreme Court, that you're 4-4?
They haven't made the appeal yet.
And Jordan, I find this all, you know, if you go to the Supreme Court and you're 4-4 and it bounces back to Seattle, and that judge ultimately is successful, I don't know what that says about sort of the state of where we are as a country when we're not even entrusting our own president to judge national security information to you know, say, hey, we got to be careful here, especially when it comes to these 7 countries.
Yeah, but, you know, the issue is it's assuming that the Supreme Court even definitely takes it. You know, Justice Kennedy could get this emergency stay, and we're kind of getting late in the time for emergency requests to come to him, because if it was an emergency, it should have already been prepared, probably either filed last night or this morning. It still could happen, but let's say it does. He can basically ignore it. He can say no, he can say yes, or he can refer it to that whole court. But I think that we've got an opportunity here. If we saw what the most liberal court system in the country has issue with this executive order, and we know we could just issue a new executive order that could go into effect whatever the Trump administration would like. Is that
so that's what you're saying, just in terms of getting stuff done. I hear you.
Yeah.
So issue a new order. Aren't they just going to fight that one too?
They're going to fight it, and listen, the Ninth Circuit may still find reason, even if you handle the students, even if you handle the green card holders. The Ninth Circuit, Trish, may still find a reason to put a hold on it, a restraining order. But by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, and again, it'll still be 8 justices there, I think that you have even better case. I think this one is still a good one.
Let me just jump in, because, you know, we got a country to run. You know, the courts, they can fight all they want. We have a country to run, and we need to protect our people. And in the last 7 days,
what you want, Trish,
you've got hundreds and hundreds of people coming here. I just played the sound earlier from Obama's own administration saying there's no way these people can be vetted. But yet 359 just arrived in the last week from Syria, 252 from Iraq, 109 from Iran, 130 from Somalia. In other words, they are coming in at an extraordinary clip. And Jordan, you can fight this out all you want. What do you do if there's one terrorist in that bunch?
Well, that's the issue here. And, you know, it was unbelievable that the court said there's no evidence of it. First of all, you don't need to show that. The president can make national security decisions without presenting evidence to a bunch of judges to decide if there's enough evidence to ban certain people. That's the president's job, and Congress has given him that authority as well. But we know. I mean, that being said, we do know there is enough evidence to show.
I mean, you have only to look at Europe, Paris and Brussels. There you go. And
yeah,
is that really our attitude? We're just going to, you know.
Somali refugee, Ohio State University, takes his car, takes a knife. Yeah. Thankfully, didn't kill anyone. But again, and he was neutralized. But it's happened just in this past few months.
Jordan, thank you so much. Good to have your perspective. It's right now you can see the Dow up 116 points. We get the Dow, we get the S&P, we get the NASDAQ, all sitting right now at all-time highs. And you know why? There's a very big expectation that we are all going to see a tax cut. Corporations will see a tax cut. Individuals will see a tax cut. And the hope is that will really be a stimulus to the economy. Wall Street's been waiting and waiting and waiting for some kind of tax relief. And the hope is that this year they're going to get it. Certainly that's what the president indicated yesterday. All right, meanwhile, the appeals court ruling is keeping our borders open and putting us certainly at risk, especially since this will only embolden the State Department to admit as many people as possible. You hear me citing these numbers just in the last week alone. Take a look at that map. All the people that we've been bringing in the last 7 days, 74% of these refugees let in since Judge Robart's February 3rd order, they have come from countries that our president warned that government cannot properly vet. In other words, these governments have no idea who's in their country, so they can't share that information with us, and yet somehow we're vetting them? When Obama's own administration said over and over and over again they couldn't be vetted, what has changed? Joining me right now, former President George W. Bush Foreign Policy Advisor, Paul Bonicelli. Paul, good to have you here. You know, look, I said it before, you know, all this legal stuff is going on. In the meantime, if you're the President of the United States, you got a country to run, which means you've got a country that you need to keep safe. How do you deal with this onslaught of refugees coming in from countries that we know harbor terrorists?
Well, you're exactly right. You know, the governor earlier said he's not a lawyer, but he commented anyway exactly correctly. And you don't have to be a lawyer to understand it. It is a constitutional fact that the president makes these decisions. It's constitutional. It's statutory. You've mentioned the 1952 Act. And he's got one simple job to do when it comes to immigration, and that's to make sure that no one comes in that we deem unsafe. And he has every right to do what he's done. I do believe he'll prevail in the end. But in the meantime, politics is trumping our national security. That's what this court has been doing. That's what the critics of the president are doing.
That's scary.
It really is.
What does that tell you about where we're heading?
Well, I think that we're heading for a very difficult 4 years where the critics of the president, the opponents of the president, whether they're in courts or not, are determined to stop what he's doing. They have already made a priori judgments that he's wrong about what he's doing. His motivations aren't right. We know that we have a circuit court that has talked about the motivations of a president and referred to campaign speeches, which has nothing to do with what he's doing. It had nothing to do with anything Obama did or Carter or anyone else. They're making judgments about national security. And as I said, they're going to win in the end. But in the meantime, we have to put the rights, the so-called rights of possible students or professors from Iran and other countries above the national security of the United States.
Yeah, you know what, Paul, though? You talked about the Ninth Circuit, and I want to share with you, Supreme Court admonishes Ninth Circuit, direct quote from 2011, because you know what? The Ninth Circuit, quote, exhibited judicial disregard for, quote, sound and established principles of law. I mean, our own Supreme Court is telling us that the Ninth Circuit doesn't know how to do its job, and yet the Ninth Circuit and a judge in Seattle is getting in the way of the very essence of the presidency. I mean, I keep saying this, that the one thing we need to be able to do is secure our borders and keep our people safe.
Absolutely. And this is a judge who can't read as much intelligence as, you know, a captain in the military. It's absurd that he would think that he has the right to do that, the role to do that. You would think, actually, that he would prefer to be judicious and stay away from decisions he can't make and shouldn't make. But I do think this is activism. It is blatantly opposed to the president is what it is. And I'm sorry for that. I would say that if it was a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter who it is. It's a very dangerous thing.
No, and unfortunately, our legal system has just gotten flooded in recent years with activist judges, and it's just wrong. Their job, their one and only job should be to uphold and interpret the law and yet they're trying to remake the world as they see fit in an image that they want, and this is where you get into all kinds of trouble. Right. Paul, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining me today.
Good to see you, Trish. Thanks.
All right, protesters shutting down a section of the Los Angeles freeway today. Take a look at these pictures. All over reports of immigration raids. Officials are saying the raids are only routine. They're not any kind of crackdown. But you know what? You get a situation right now in this country where you get all these tensions. They're running super high. According to Pew Research Center, Los Angeles and Orange counties are home to 1 million immigrants living in this country without proper papers. This is more Democratic-controlled cities are declaring themselves safe havens for illegal immigrants. Whatever happened to just going about it legally, right? Attaining U.S. citizenship in the right, proper, legal way. Here's someone who did exactly that. Nick Adams, founder of the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness. Nick spent years and tens of thousands of dollars, I hear, working to become a U.S. citizen. What was that process like?
Oh, Trish, it was absolute torture. It took me 4.5 years. It cost me close to $50,000 to be able to get my extraordinary ability green card. It's a very long process. It's an onerous process. But if you're going to come to the United States, the most important country in the world, the greatest country in the history of the world, Trish, it's really important that you come the right way. And despite the incredible wait time and everything that I had to go through, I'm proud to say that I never, ever once contemplated, even for a fleeting moment, coming to America the wrong way.
Think of it, you know, you're either, it shouldn't be that hard, right? Like, why is it somehow prejudice or seen as prejudice of us to say, you got to come here legally? I mean, why does the left demonize that in such, I mean, you're either here legally or you're not here legal. I mean, it's illegal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And why would you want people whose first action joining the country is to break the law? That's not the kind of person that you want here in the United States. You want someone who's going to come and contribute. You want someone who's forthright, someone who's honest. You want someone who's coming to join the place and not change it. And I think...
But that said, Nick, I mean, we don't make it that easy. To your point, it cost you $50,000, and if you're, a laborer from a country such as many are coming from, you don't have $50,000 hanging around. You probably don't have $500 hanging around. In other words, you can't pay your way in. Maybe you're not literate enough to even fill out all the paperwork, but maybe you're truly a hardworking person that can help make this country better. So how do we develop a system where we're getting the best and the brightest and the ones with the most work ethic, and we're bringing them here, and there's a path for them, and we're keeping the bad guys out? I mean, isn't that what Donald Trump's trying to do?
He is. He's just trying to keep the country safe. I don't understand what all the fuss is about. But, Trish, it's really simple. We need to make it really easy for good people to come and impossible for bad people to come.
I like that.
But unfortunately, that's not the way it works. Right now, it's really hard for the good people to come and really easy for the bad people to come. That's not a good outcome for America. It's not a good outcome for Western civilization. And we've got to demand that people that are going to come to the United States have got to be American. They've got to speak English. They've got to love the country. They can't just be coming here, Trish, for a job. They can't just be coming here for opportunity. There should be something inbuilt that they're coming to America because it's the best.
No, there's a cultural buy-in, and we had it in previous generations, and you're not seeing it today, and this is a real problem. Nick, good to have you here. Thank you very much for sharing your story. All right, the left, just out of control these days, protesting just about everything coming out of the White House. Everything and anything. You could say they've taken this just a bit too far, because I want you to see this. Check out this new video. It just came into us. New Education Secretary Betsy DeVos physically blocked from entering a Washington middle school. Do we have it? Can we show everybody? Because, she's blocked from walking in, and you get all these protesters yelling at her, shame. She had to be escorted back to her car. Ms. DeVos was later able to enter the school through a separate door. Joining me right now is the author of GOP GPS, Evan Siegfried, and syndicated radio host Chris Hahn. Good to have both of you guys here. Chris, I'll start with you because the Democratic Party, they're just coming apart at the seams because they're so upset over everything that Trump is doing. And I keep saying, at what point do you actually start to just become background noise because nobody hears you anymore, because people are just sort of sick and tired of all this hysteria?
Do you know who you sound like right now? Me in 2009.
This is what everybody was saying on the left about what the right was doing with the Tea Party movement in 2009, and they were absolutely wrong. I was wrong, and everybody else was wrong. Look, I don't feel bad that she's getting protest. I'm against people being blocked from entering things, but she just had to walk around to another entrance. But there's going to be protests the next couple of years because people are not happy with the policies the president's proposing. So you think it actually amounts to something? I
mean, I look at all the, unfortunately, and I don't mean to stereotype in any way, but, I did live in San Francisco for a while, and there are people that just like to protest, right? They love to protest, and this is now an opportunity to have a big protest party, and they're just going to keep doing it. The difference is, and again, I'm making some stereotypes here, Chris, so bear with me, but the difference is, in general, the right doesn't really like to protest. They don't really like to get out there. Nah, the Tea Party thing is unusual. I mean, these are not the, Vietnam-era folks that, want to go out there and hold a rally just to hold a rally.
I will concede that there are more people on the left that are interested in protesting than those on the right. But the right's protests over the last 8 years were effective, and they elected a Congress and eventually a president.
Right, but here's where I'm going with this.
And
perhaps Evan can add to this. I think the right is a little more organized. The right is, maybe a little less into the protests, but actually into getting something done. I hear you. You're saying, look, that they made a whole lot of noise in the Tea Party. You didn't think it would ever amount to anything. And gosh, it sure as heck did. But, I just wonder if there are some distinguishing factors that, sort of underlie these two populations, the left and the right, that might make it harder for those on the left to actually translate this into anything.
Yes, the right didn't get outraged at every single thing that President Obama did. They picked their battles. Now, there are some voices on the right who did do that. I could hear my good friend Chris
but
laughing.
By the way, you're right on that, because I remember so many people on the right being like, when President Obama was talking about tax reform, corporate tax reform, and they said, finally, he's talking about something that will be meaningful to this economy. And, they gave credit where credit was due. They were hard on him, and at times too hard, but perhaps not as crazed as what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, she was warned, as Secretary DeVos, yet nonetheless she persisted and found another way in. But when have we ever on the right tried to physically block a woman from going and doing her job? To give you an idea how crazy the left is in these protests, Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, who served under President Obama, actually came out today on Twitter and defended Secretary DeVos and said this was wrong. We should have her going into public schools. But the left went crazy on him on Twitter and said he's betraying the resistance.
Why are they so after Betsy? No. I mean, of all the people you could possibly go after, Chris, why Betsy DeVos? Is it just because the unions are so entrenched in our public school system?
Well, look, 99% of Americans either went to public school or currently have a child in public school, and her statements on public schools have been not so good. So I think there's going to be a lot of resistance.
Good.
Well, it depends on where you're from. I'm a product of a public school. I did okay. I know Evan probably went to a public school. I don't know about you. I think
in
you
New York
did
City?
As well. But
no, I wouldn't go to a public school in New York City because they're falling apart.
And when I don't mean to portray your Upper East Side.
How dare you accuse me of being from the Upper East Side?
No, but you know what? He's absolutely right. It is a travesty. I got little kids right now. We live in New York City. I can't send them to public school, and that's a real shame. That needs to change. And so when you think about some of these communities out there, Betsy DeVos actually could make a difference. She could force schools in the inner city of New York and Chicago and L.A. to actually get their acts together, put a little consumerism into the equation, and enable parents to actually get their kids to a school that's halfway decent.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
I don't know that the Secretary of Education could force anyone to do anything. I think she can make some proposals that might be adopted by local school boards and states to try to enhance education. And if she does that and she's successful at that, I think you'll see these protests die.
So if you're telling me she has no power, then why is everybody so worked up?
Because she's somebody who gets people worked up. Her statements are the most divisive, at least on her topic.
Chris, you want to know what gets real people worked up? In New York City in 2013, there was the Rally for Charter Schools. It took over 20,000 students and parents across New York City, most of them African American and Hispanic, to march across the Brooklyn Bridge and say, we want to have our kids not go to failing public schools, but to charter schools and have school choice. That is a real protest. That is what the left should be focusing on.
And by all means, they should have that choice. Every parent should have the opportunity to give their child a great education, regardless of how much money you have. Evan, Chris, thank you so much. All right, left freaking out. It's kind of a regular course of action these days, right? At this point, though, they're crying about a conflict of interest over a recent tweet from President Trump about his daughter, in which the president said, and I quote, "Ivanka has been treated so unfairly by Nordstrom. She is a great person, always pushing me to do the right thing." Now, this was in response to the company dropping Ivanka's clothing line. Well, not only is this not the earth-shattering situation the left wants it to be, it's also not alone in history. I want to point out, way back in 1950, President Harry Truman wrote to the editor of the Washington Post after one of its critics didn't like his daughter's singing, complained that she sang flat, couldn't sing on tune, etc. And he wrote in this letter, "It seems to me that you are a frustrated old man who wishes he could have been successful. When you write such poppycock, as you did in the back section of the paper you work for, it shows conclusively you're off the beam. Someday I hope to meet you. When that happens, you'll need a new nose, a lot of beefsteak for black eyes, and perhaps a sorter blow." I guess meaning he's heading straight to HE-double-L. I mean, no matter what you think of the president right here, you know, I'm a parent. A parent is a parent. Father's a father. A mother's a mother. I got another father right here with me, Governor Mike Huckabee, who agrees with that, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, if someone went after your daughter, or in a way that you perceived as was going after her, you'd fight back too.
Oh, heavens, yes. You know, I think it's one of the natural instincts of a parent is to fight for your children. And I think fathers especially feel that for their daughters. You know, you feel like your sons can fight for themselves, but you feel like your daughter is special. You're going to protect her. Nobody ever is going to say something to her.
That's that father-daughter thing, right?
There is something special
mothers and
about
sons,
that. No,
too,
it
to a
is.
certain extent.
And you know, when I read this wonderful thing of Harry Truman, I'm thinking, thank God he didn't have a Twitter account. Could you imagine Harry Truman?
This is, by the way, I'm like, this is, you know, he was worse than Trump here. I mean,
Well,
he really lashed out with the kind of pizzazz that I think has only been reserved in modern times or in recent days.
But I think people love the candor, the honesty, the earthiness, the raw emotion that they know exists in themselves. And when they see it, whether it's in Donald Trump or Harry Truman for that matter, it's kind of like, yeah, there's a real person, somebody who hasn't been so carefully packaged and filtered and whitewashed over and painted over so that he looks like he's something that he isn't. That's what I think people like about Donald Trump.
Responding to, you know, someone was saying to me the other day, though, but this is just wrong. You know, he shouldn't be using the Twitter account. And by the way, I think he had POTUS retweet it.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be using the White House Twitter account. And I said, wait a second.
Yeah.
He's trying to protect his daughter. Like,
well,
you know, I get it. You know, you
yeah.
hold this office and it comes with a certain, you know, you got to act a certain way. But when you feel like you're trying to protect a family member, you know,
well, come after me, blow it off. Come after my daughter, knuckle sandwich time, you know.
Ouch.
Yeah, a lot. It's going to put Subway out of business. We're talking sandwiches coming at you. I just think that's an instinct, and frankly, I think it's a good instinct to say, don't mess with my children.
He didn't even say anything that bad. I mean, he said, you know, look, they didn't treat her right.
Yeah.
And she's a great girl, and she's, you know, been so wonderful to me. You saw the tweet. I mean, it wasn't like he was saying, do not ever shop at Nordstrom's again.
If that's the worst thing they can come up with on Donald Trump is that he loves and protects his daughter, good luck taking him apart, because most Americans can relate, identify, appreciate, and approve of a father saying something to defend his daughter when he thinks she's been treated unfairly. Now, what did Nordstrom just make a business decision, not a political one? I have no idea. But I know this, if somebody had done that to my daughter, to me, it would have been political, and I would have been ticked off.
And I would have expected the same from my dad. Thank you so much, Governor Huckabee. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
We're going to take a quick break. I'll be right back. All right, take a look at this market. We've got stocks in record territory today, off the highs of the session, but wow, up 96 points. They're heading into the weekend after closing at record highs just yesterday. So a lot of momentum here. And you know why? It's all because President Donald Trump said he would make a major tax announcement in the next few weeks. Watch.
Lowering the overall tax burden on American business is big league. That's coming along very well. We're way ahead of schedule, I believe, and we're going to be announcing something, I would say, over the next 2 or 3 weeks that will be phenomenal in terms of
tax.
Phenomenal, okay? And you know what? The market really likes that. They're getting excited. That's why you saw the big rally yesterday. That's why you're seeing the big rally today. The White House and Republicans in Congress, they've been talking about tax reform for like ever, right? They've wanted to get some kind of corporate tax through. Now it looks like there's a real shot of actually getting a corporate tax and an individual tax. However, there's also this controversial border tax proposal out there as well. We want to get to all of it with economist Brian Bremberg and Fox News contributor Steve Cortes. Good to see both you guys. All right, first of all, sort of Econ 101 from the economics professor here. Brian, why are tax cuts good for this economy when folks like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and everyone else will tell you all you're doing is lining the pockets of the wealthy?
Because the economy is growing at less than 2%, which means people's wages aren't growing, businesses aren't investing, and people can't improve their livelihoods. And they know it. They've been asking for this repeatedly. Nobody's been willing to give it to them. Donald Trump is saying, we will give you a tax cut. The market is reacting to Donald Trump saying, we will give you a tax cut. No details in the plan, and we know it's going to take a few months to get there. And yet they're reacting like crazy because the economy needs this so badly.
And by the way, he did say it would be phenomenal and big league, all right? So there may not be a lot of details, but we know it's going to be phenomenal. We know it's going to be big league. Steve Cortes, what do you think it's going to look like?
You know, listen, it is going to be phenomenal, and Brian's exactly right. We need it so badly in this country. Sadly, we've almost become accustomed to slow growth, but America's too great a country for that, to accept the mediocrity that we've endured over the last decade plus, and for workers not having a pay raise yet, the average American worker yet in this century. It's 2017. That has to change. How is it going to change? To answer your question specifically, it's going to be a combination of individual tax reform and simplification and corporate tax reform. And on the corporate side, this is what I'm actually most enthused about. I think we're going to see literally just a torrent of capital from around the world pour into the United States. A lot of it profits that are essentially trapped because of our tax policy overseas that are going to be repatriated. They're going to be invested in American businesses and American jobs. I have to tell you, the American economy has been like a car that is driving with the parking brake on because of our tax policy. We take that parking brake off, and it's going to take off like a Maserati.
I like that analogy. Hey, Steve, but what about this border tax proposal? Because there's been some controversy about that. I know that you are not a guy who likes to operate with sticks, but more carrots. Tell me what this border tax proposal might look like.
No, you're exactly right. I'm more focused on making America such a phenomenal place to do business that businesses don't want to do business elsewhere or don't want to manufacture elsewhere. The border tax, I'm skeptical on, to be honest. And we'll see what the details come out with. But this is one of the rare areas where I may disagree with the White House. I'm just too worried that a border tax becomes a tax essentially on the American consumer, particularly working class people who really can't afford any new taxes at this point. Now, I do think it's important, and I would agree with a lot of the Republicans in Congress, I think it's important as a weapon in terms of trade negotiations, because I do think we have a lot of very unfair trade deals right now, and I think Trump was exactly right about that during the campaign.
Can all that get reversed, Brian? I mean, do you think that there's a real shot we could start to see a more fair trade situation sometime in the next couple of years?
You know, we talk so much about a fair trade situation, leveling the playing field, but really, Trish, I think that the solution starts here. The solution starts with tax reform here, regulatory reform here. If we fix those things, the U.S. economy can compete, and we don't have to worry about these.
By the way, we're a very big
we're
economy.
Productive. We have great workers. I mean, Steve's right when he talks about the parking brake. Let's take the parking brake off. These issues with NAFTA, TPP, I think those really recede to the background when you let the American worker do what he and she are capable of doing. We haven't done that for a long time.
Give money back to the people who are actually earning it and the corporations that are earning it in the first place. Let them decide how to spend it. Thanks so much. Good to see you guys. We're taking a quick break. I'll see you back here in 2 minutes. All right, tonight, everyone, I'm going to be co-hosting Wall Street Week with my friend Gary Kaminsky. Make sure you tune in at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be interviewing former Barclays CEO Bob Diamond and former Reagan OMB Director David Stockman. Both of them have a lot of thoughts on those potential tax cuts we'll see from Donald Trump, so do not miss it. In the meantime, Liz has you covered, and I'll see you at 6 p.m. on Special Report tonight. Hey, Liz.